Hi, my name is David Simon. I'm a sculptor, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to take measurements from a model to create a portrait sculpture. So the first measurement that we're always going to take is going to be from a structure that's called the antitragal notch. So the most important structures that we're going to be looking at are this flap of skin that everybody has, which is called the tragus. Opposite that, this little notch at the very bottom is called the antitragal notch. The antitragal notch is where we're going to take all our measurements from. It's a great measuring point because it's at the very bottom of this whole opening here. So if we're measuring from the tragus, I might measure from here, I might measure from here, I might measure from here, but the antitragal notch, we're always going to be right here, the very bottom before it moves backward, before it moves upward. Always the first measurement I will take will be from one antitragus to the other, and that will establish the overall width of the model's head. The next point we're going to need to find is the tip of the nose. Now, where on the nose are we looking for? We're looking for the furthest point out. And the way I like to establish that is to think about Louise submerged in a pool of water, and as the water drains out, the first point of her nose that would emerge from the water would be the very tip of the nose. And that's the point where I want the nail to be, the very, very furthest point out on the face. The next measurement I'm going to take is from the antitragal notch to the tip of the chin. Now, again, I imagine the model submerged in a pool of water. You drain the water out of that pool, and the first point of the chin that emerges from the water would be the furthest point out, or the very tip of the chin. So the brow will vary in terms of how easy it is to find on different people. You know, I, for example, have a fairly prominent brow. The high point of my brow is above my eyebrows. And again, if you're looking at the profile of the model, her brow kind of peaks, right? It kind of comes up and then starts turning back. So she has, you know, a relatively prominent brow. Not as prominent as I have, but relatively prominent in the sense that there's an arc to it and you can see the high point right here. The final of the triangulated measurements is probably the easiest and requires the least judgment. And it's simply where the forehead rather ends and the hair begins. So normally the way I find this is I ask the model to pull their hair back. So you can see really clearly here, right where her hair ends and her forehead begins, just where that junction is. When you take the antitragal notch to the nose, antitragal notch to the chin, antitragal notch to the brow, and the antitragal notch to the hairline, what you're really finding out is the depth of all of those points. Now we want to find the interval between them. So how close to the brow is the tip of the nose? How far from the tip of the nose is the chin? And so there, what I need to do is measure simply from the same point that I measured on the hairline to the same point that I measured on the brow. Then from the same point that I measured on the brow to the same point that I measured on the tip of the nose, and from the tip of the nose to the chin. Now for the simple measurements, I measure the width of the mouth from one corner of the mouth to the other, the width of the nose from the widest part of the nose on one side, the width of the eyes, which is, for me, the most nerve-wracking measurement because you're taking metal calipers and going right up to somebody's eyes. So you want to be very, very careful. So that measurement will be from the outside of one eye to the outside of the other eye, and then from the outside of one eye to the inside corner of the same eye. So once I have the overall width of the eyes and the width of one eye, I don't need any more eye measurements because that automatically tells me how big the space between the eyes are. The final measurements that I take are the height of the ear from the bottom of the ear to the top. And then I take a very, very two very loose measurements. One from the tip of the chin to the pit of the neck. The last measurement, which is also a fairly rough measurement, is from the tip of the nose, the same place that we measured initially, to the very furthest point back of the hair. And the reason that that's going to be a rough measurement, especially on Louise, for example, is that her hair is going to change constantly. Every time she sort of takes a break and moves around, her hair will be a little bit different. And again, that measurement is just to give me an idea that her head isn't way too flat or way too wide. It's helpful to just get me in the general area of where I want the size of her head to be. I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial. And if you did, I have an entire Domestika course going through the entire process of creating a sculpture portrait from beginning to end. I hope to see you there.